Hello, everyone. I'm Zhucheng. Today, let's learn about Paul the Allosaurus. Allosaurus was a genus of well-known carnivorous dinosaurs with a large number. Being numerous was something rare among carnivorous dinosaurs. We know that carnivorous dinosaurs such as T-Rex and the Chinese Yangchuanosaurus were always in small quantity. A large number of hadrosaur fossils were found in Zhucheng, Shandong, but there were only several fossils of Zhuchengtyrannus. Similarly, a large number of ceratopsian fossils were discovered in Alberta, Canada, but there were only few fossils of carnivorous dinosaurs among them. Some people used to describe Allosaurus as the lion in the Jurassic period, which explains the fact to some extent. Numerous fossils of Allosaurus are collected. They were like lions living in packs. Fossils of Allosaurus are good examples for us to understand carnivorous dinosaurs at present. As there are a lot of materials, we can know more about it. Its skeletal structure has been accurately restored. In this restoration, we based on a well-known specimen called Big Al. Big Al was first assigned to Allosaurus fragilis, but later was assigned to another species, Allosaurus jamasoni. The specimen of Big Al is complete, and there are a lot of wounds on its body. We based on the Big Al when we made the model, but what we wanted to present is a healthy dinosaur group. Therefore, there are not too many wounds on the model, and you can see a complete and healthy appearance. Let's first see its head. The head of Allosaurus was like that of a typical carnivorous dinosaur, whose mouth was filled with sharp teeth. But one big difference between the teeth of Allosaurus and those of other carnivorous dinosaurs was that it had tiny teeth, while other carnivorous dinosaurs had large ones. Its teeth were short. Take this model for example. Generally, the teeth are only 5 centimeters long and the longest teeth rarely exceed 10 centimeters. Allosaurus jamasoni had a long and square head, which was very different from the typical Allosaurus fragilis. The head of Allosaurus jamasoni looked like a square, while that of Allosaurus fragilis was generally a triangle with a pointed snout. The snout of Allosaurus jamasoni was blunt and this position was relatively high. From the top, you can see that its snout was also very wide. Its head top had 2 pairs of ridges on both sides, looking like an S shape seen from above, which bulged outward here and there. Actually, it had 2 crests on each side of its head. The first crest stretched out sideways, and it was short. The second one was its lacrimal horn. The lacrimal horn was very large. Generally, lacrimal horns were nearly diamond according to the fossils. When it was alive, they were covered by some keratin sheaths. If you look at the fossil carefully, you can see some wrinkles on it, which was the feature of fixing the keratin. When it was alive, there might be a large keratin sheath here. Besides, Allosaurus had a relatively thin lower jaw. When it opened its mouth, as you can see from the model, its lower jaw was thin. When it was alive, as there were strong muscles wrapped in, this restored part slightly bulges and looks round. Allosaurus had small eyes, behind which there were relatively large lateral temporal fenestrae. When it was alive, its temporal fenestrae were filled with muscles stretching from its lower jaw. Apart from that, the mouth of Allosaurus had another feature that it could open extremely wide. This might mean that it was good at preying on animals of this size, and swallowing them in one gulp. Its teeth were not big, and tearing flesh and skin of large animals was not easy as capturing small animals for it, so small animals might be its main food, which was convenient for it to swallow in one gulp. In the past, there was a speculation that as Allosaurus had a big mouth, when preying on animals, it could use its teeth in the upper jaw as a chopper to chop and bite animals, and pull them backward. That is an opinion. Different people have different views. Another opinion is that as its mouth was wide open, it could bite animals with a large size that were difficult for ordinary predators to bite. Of course, this is also possible. In addition to its head, let's take a look at its neck. Allosaurus had a somewhat long neck. unlike other typical carnivorous dinosaurs that had a short neck, such as T-Rex. Seen from the bones, the neck of Allosaurus was always longer than that of its skull. We use a computer to simulate the movement of its neck, and find that its neck was very flexible. When it was alive, perhaps it would look for prey like this with the help of its neck. Next, let's take a look at its body. In the past, it was often compared with T-Rex. Allosaurus had a narrow body, while T-Rex had a full and round one. That was true when compared with T-Rex. But using the new computational analysis, we find that the body of Allosaurus was not as narrow as estimated in the past. Its body was still wide and sturdy. Seen from above, its body cavity was still very round. In the past, they said its body was flat because a lot of ribs were found out of shape, and the rib cage formed by the ribs was flat, which made it difficult to speculate what it was like when it was alive. Nowadays, with complete ribs or using a computer to restore the deformation caused by the formation force, we can get a relatively accurate body cavity. Then we can deduce that its body was relatively round. Next, let's look at its forelimbs. Allosaurus had big forelimbs, but smaller than its hind limbs. But compared with many later carnivorous dinosaurs, such as its close relatives, Carcharodontosaurids, its forelimbs were large. There were 3 big claws, with the first 2 ones bigger than the third one. When it was relaxed, the palms of its 2 hands faced each other. Most carnivorous dinosaurs could bend their hands at a 90-degree angle, which showed they were relaxed. The wrists of Allosaurus were fixed, so it could only move like this, and it couldn't move vertically. Therefore, when we do the restoration, we often make its forelimbs as if it was carrying a basketball. Allosaurus had very long hind legs, which enabled it to run very fast. Its feet were small, and it didn't have fat and thick pads as what T-Rex had. Its feet looked small, which was typical among carnivorous dinosaurs. Each foot had foot toes. The toe off the ground was smaller, and the claw at its end was curved and sharp. The other 3 toes had blunt claws. The roots of these 3 toes were not on the same line. Look at my hand. Suppose the 3 of my fingers are its toes. The root of its middle toe leaned forward, and the other 2 ones leaned backward. Therefore, when it walked, it mainly relied on the middle toe, and the other 2 ones just assisted it. Such a structure made the toes on the 2 sides look short. The 2 bones were shorter and thinner, while the middle one was thicker and stronger. So, when it walked, as soon as it lifted its feet, it was like this. The toes on the 2 sides curved first, and the middle toe served as the final support as it made steps. Therefore, as you can see from the model, if it walked forward, especially when it turned right, and kicked this leg far, it would lift this toe first. Besides, Allosaurus had a thick and strong tail. It had a long tail, which was almost half of its body length, and it could balance the seesaw-like structure of its body. Its tail was also very heavy, which allowed its body to maintain balance. From the top, we can see that the root of its tail was thick, connected with a lot of muscles from the 2 sides. On the tail of Allosaurus, there was a structure stretching out to the left and right sides, which was called the transverse process. The transverse process was in an upper position. As its chevrons were very long, the boundary between the muscles above and below the transverse process could be seen in the upper position. It had short neural spines, but its dorsal muscles were narrow and thin. The muscles on the 2 sides of its tail were wide. It had a long tail, which didn't swing to a large extent, because the joints of its tail were not very flexible. Lastly, let's take a look at its skin. A small piece of its skin near its thigh was found earlier. Recently, people found some skins on the other parts of its body. These skins all show that Allosaurus had fine scales, which were only several millimeters big. Between these scales, there were some bigger scales, as the model shows. When we restored it, we make a row of spikes on its back, resembling those of iguanas. There is no fossil evidence of that, but we don't rule out the possibility. Because the head of Allosaurus was bright, perhaps such flaunty animals might grow some decorative structures here. Such a structure was not unprecedented among carnivorous dinosaurs. For example, Carnotaurus and even Ceratosaurus both had spikes on their back. Although Allosaurus was not closely related to them, for large animals with bare skin, it was not strange to have such structures. The above are some introductions about Paul the Allosaurus. Thank you all.